So welcome to the latest in the series of the development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Martine Scannell and I work on the NIHR Academy as the Development and Support Manager. So this webinar, Building an Effective Network, is delivered in collaboration between the NIHR Academy and Oak Ridge, one of our Leadership Development Programme partners. So this webinar will be facilitated by Mark Blanchard and Joe Clare, both senior consultants at Oak Ridge, who have extensive experience in behavioural and cultural change and are extremely passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. So Mark, I'm now going to hand over to you.
So what we're going to cover today, we're going to describe what networking is and what networking isn't. The importance of planning in networking, that it's an activity that should be planned. So talk about planning networking and offer some tips and techniques to help your networking activities be even more effective than they are today. So firstly, we pulled up this definition from the Oxford English Dictionary about networking. And what resonates for me in this particular definition is the words interact. It's about interacting with people. It's about exchanging, which is a mutuality. There's a giving and receiving of information and knowledge in the aim of achieving a specific outcome. So your network can introduce you to lots of different opportunities, provide you with information, share knowledge with you, and provide you with support. And we believe that successful networking requires mutuality. So it's a principle of mutuality. There needs to be some value derived from both parties. It's not just about you getting what you need, it's about the other person as well. Networking should have a purpose. It's not the kind of thing, if you've got an hour free in your day that you want to fill it with something, oh well, I need to do some networking. There should be a purpose to networking. Why are you spending this time and effort and an investment of time? Why are you doing that? And finally, planning. Some thought needs to go into how you're going to build these relationships to avoid wasting time and effort, and for your networking experience to become demotivating. There are some common perceptions of networking. So that perception of, oh, it takes too much time. I haven't got any time for networking. It takes too much time. It's not proper work, it's kind of socializing. So you can't justify networking at work because you've got work to do. It feels uncomfortable and awkward. So yeah, avoid networking because it's selling. It's kind of selling something. So that kind of feels awkward and uncomfortable for many folks. And networking, you only kind of network when you want something. So you got to wait until you want something, and then you start your networking activities. From those on the screen, we've got a poll now. So Joe, could you open a poll? And which ones of these resonate with you? Which like a common perception you may have of networking?
I've just opened the poll now. So just indicate multiple choice which ones resonate for you.
Which one of those resonate for you, Joe, in the past, your perception? So not now, but in the past, how would you perceive networking?
I think it's a combination of that feeling of selling and uncomfortable and awkwardness. I think when I first started, it felt a bit disingenuous and not quite authentic. But by thinking about that mutuality principle, I think that really helped me to overcome some of those feelings.
Great stuff, yeah. And how are folks feeling on the line? 92%.
Yeah, so definitely the uncomfortable and awkward is a popular feeling. The 80% have responded with that. Taking too much time, actually quite low, 14%. It's not proper work, it's socializing, only 4%. So I think people really value that benefit of networking. Selling, 18%. Maybe that's the kind of work that's done within this forum more so. And then people only network when they want something, 44%. So again, quite another popular feeling of perception, shall we say.
That's great, thank you.
I'll just end the poll and pop it up on the screen so people can see it. Hopefully you can see that there.
Great.
Lovely. Okay.
So there's some common perceptions, and it's not misperceptions, it's common perceptions of networking, and creating that confidence to actually go out and do networking, spend some time and effort in it to actually create some value for yourselves. It's really important. There are some views of how you should be viewing networking on the screen there. Overall, it's an activity that should improve your productivity. Having a network enables you to access knowledge that you wouldn't normally have access to contacts. It should be part of your role and career development. So many organizations, there's an expectation of people looking to progress and advance their career, is that how are you increasing your network and your contacts? It may not be comfortable, but it's a necessary part of achieving success. So there are some things that we have to do in order to be successful, and it's having the confidence to be able to tackle that. And ultimately, for me, if I reflect personally, then it's a way for me to give back something. So I gain experience and wisdom, however you want to term it, over the course of my life. And this is a great opportunity for me to give something back to help others, help them be successful. So why do we do it? So some specific areas that have for consideration. So the first one, that your networking space is a space to find and develop influential supporters of your aspirations, people who have been there and done it. I mean, quite often we learn things through experience, and so you have to experience something to think, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Actually, having sponsorship, support, and challenge from your network means you can learn from wisdom. You can avoid some of the pitfalls other people have been through. Raising your profile. Automatically, networking increases your visibility, raises your profile beyond your immediate circle of the people you normally interact with on a day-to-day basis. And this can result in access to opportunities you wouldn't normally be aware of. Forbes did a study which has kind of reinforced and validated a common anecdotal evidence that actually they found that 70 to 80% of roles are never posted and are actually filled via networking channels. So for example, LinkedIn is an example of quite often roles and opportunities are shared through LinkedIn networks before they actually become official. And even if a role needs to be advertised, you've got an advantage there of being able to access your network to find out much more about the role, which makes you a better candidate. Access to resources. So sources are relevant and emerging information. So things you may not be aware of, other people in the network will be aware of. Interests, areas of expertise and things like that. So your network almost becomes your extended eyes and ears in the wider world, picking up information. Networking is a great way of further developing your confidence outside of interacting with the people you're in daily contact with. So having the confidence to introduce yourself to complete and often more senior, more experienced strangers can be quite daunting. But by applying a structured approach to networking, can actually remove some of that and help you being able to introduce yourselves to people. I know when I've connected with people that I think they're never going to accept my invitation to connect, and it's amazing that they do, and I'm thinking, wow, that's great. And this is because people see the power and the value of networking. Developing those mutual relationships. So as I've previously described, it's a way of helping others and actually being able to give back. And in return for that, then you receive something of value. So it's about mutuality. And finally, improving creativity. Kind of the others, the other elements on the slide here is developing that network. Is that it becomes a safe space to actually share ideas with a like-minded and a diverse set of individuals that can help bring new perspectives to what we're doing, help shape our own thinking. We can't possibly know everything in the world and be able to come up with the best idea, best solutions, and being able to resolve issues in the best way. And network is a really powerful tool to be able to do that, creating that safe space. So I'm going to have another poll now. So which of these benefits, so just choose one of those, which one of these do you recognize as being the most benefit for you through networking?
I launched the poll, Mark.
Thank you, Joe.
I think when we think about the benefits, it's in terms of the ones that are valuable from my perspective, certainly the access to resources and sharing information and best practice is really, really important. And I think, that's one of the real benefits I see from planned and purposeful networking.
Definitely.
Okay, we've got 96 participation, so I'm going to end the poll. I'll share it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And what we can see here is the mutual relationships is really popular benefit, so 45%. Sponsorship, support and challenge, 12%. Raising your profile, 12%. Access to resources, 17%, so slightly higher. Developing confidence, 10%, and improving creativity, 3%. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? Perhaps that's something that people can maybe bring more into their networking, is how can I improve my creativity? How can I come up with some new and exciting and innovative ideas around my work?
Yeah, and reflecting on that 45%, so if the initial benefit is creating those mutual relationships, then maybe creativity comes off the back of that, but wasn't the initial motivation to do it. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Do you want to close down the poll?
I will. 1 second.
That's what I've got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
There's an organization called VTI who developed the Researcher Development Framework, the RDF. There is a link to the RDF framework at the end of this slide deck. So when you get a copy of the slides, there's a link in there for you. They commissioned a report called Straight Talking. And that looked at the role of networking in career conversations for researchers. So it's a researcher-oriented report. Here's a couple of recommendations that came out of that particular report. The key takeaways for me were that we're often tempted to only network with those nearby as it's easier. So the report came up that, it's easy if you know the people, you're kind of networking with them, but you're not really networking. But this assumes that those people are willing and able to offer the support and knowledge that will be useful for career progression. And quite often, many of the people we interact with on a daily basis may not have that knowledge or wisdom that we actually seek to be, to help us progress our careers. So actually, there is a need to move outside our comfort zone and reach out to people that we don't know, but they do have the skills and knowledge to be able to help us. The other thing was that networking was quite often seen as too kind of time-consuming. Hence the poll at the beginning of today's webinar. It can be a bit daunting, like how do you approach it? How do I go up to somebody who's a complete stranger? This is not really comfortable for me. And a feeling that actually, do we really need to network to get on in life? However, it is well reported that the benefits of networking much more outweigh the effort put in. If you see the value, then you'll put the effort in. And quite often what we may not be seeing is the value of networking, because if we saw that, we would do networking. So it's kind of building that kind of business case for yourself as to what you're aiming to get out of it, and then actually be able to see the benefits of that through your networking activities. With that, I will hand over to Joe, who's going to take us through looking at some key principles of networking and some tools and techniques to help you more effectively network.
Thanks, Mark. Great. So now we're kind of maybe reconvinced about the power of networking. For those of us that were feeling a little bit uncomfortable about it, we understand it's a necessary part of our work. Let's start to think about how we do it. And we've got some guiding principles to help you have purposeful networking activity. So first, thinking about it as a longer term strategic plan. Yeah, having a direction, having a purpose, but understanding where is it we want to get to in the longer term can be really helpful. And checking in that our activities are meeting that longer term plan. Really thinking about the time we invest and recognizing that it's an investment into your career and your development goals and the successful outcome of your research and your work. And recognizing that whilst it takes time, that time is going to give you some payoff. Building regular attention and activity into your very busy calendars. How can we make sure that we keep that regular focus so we're maintaining our relationships rather than letting them slide? Taking a pay it forward approach. We've talked about mutuality a number of times, but that helps us, I think, with that feeling of integrity that's often so challenged when we are networking. And trying to approach networking without too much judgment, meeting the context and finding that focus of common ground that you share together. Where are the areas of common interest? You may have different perspectives on those areas, but the common interest is the aspect that helps us to keep that networking in terms of a principle to be positive. So Mark, just out of interest, these principles here, what helps you to keep your networking purposeful? What do you find is most beneficial?
For me, it's finding that common ground, of finding something that you may not think the person you're trying to connect with has anything in common with you, but actually they probably have, and even an intention to network is a common interest. So that feeling, that mutuality. So making sure you've got common ground really helps you develop that network, and maybe doing some pre-planning to work out what that common ground could be, and that's part of the exploration with reaching out to somebody.
Great, yeah, thank you. So when we think about planning our network activity, we really want to be thinking as broad as possible. We want to be thinking away from our day-to-day contacts, as Mark referred to in the study that came from Vitae. We want to think broad and wide. So 3 perspectives can be really helpful. The first perspective we want to look at is strategic. This is all about the future needs and wants. So people, organizations in your network that can help you identify what the future can bring, prepare you for succeeding in that future. And these often are maybe broader. They do more than likely come from outside of your current work. Special interest groups for your area of specialty, charity connections, collaborations with charity, industry connections. Thinking about what you can offer them as a starting point can help with that sense of mutuality. The second aspect of planning, developmental. So who are the people in your network that you know and trust? You can go to them for honest advice, feedback, and to discuss personal growth. So this is, of course, around strengths and how you can really exploit those strengths, but also those development areas. Hence that need to have some trust in this relationship. They may inspire you, act as a role model, could be a mentor or a coach. And you're looking here for people who you admire and see positives in both what they do and how they do it. Think about the role models that you may see in your organization and reach out and make those connections. Also thinking about people here who you might inspire and you can champion, because we can share that learning and experience with our colleagues. The final area of planning is thinking about operational networking. So these are perhaps more likely to be those closer contacts, the day-to-day contacts maybe, the people in your organization who help you get your day-to-day work done. It might be work colleagues, internal or external stakeholders, not necessarily people you directly line manage. Of course, you already have a relationship with them, but people you collaborate with to deliver your work. And thinking about these 3 categories, it should help you get a much broader picture of the relationships that you'd like to cultivate. And of course, understanding which category they fit in helps you identify the purpose of why you might want to build those relationships. So let's think about our mindset now. We've identified who we might want to connect with. Let's think about getting ourselves into the right mindset, because a mindset is really important here. We know that how we think affects how we feel, and how we feel affects how we behave, and our behavior reinforces our thoughts. So this cyclical process, if we can think back to how we might initially view networking in the introduction section, were your words more positive or more negative about networking? And if so, how can we change what we're thinking to create that more positive feeling towards networking? If we can do that, we can feel more confident about it. We can feel that the behavior will feel more confident, and that will reinforce the feeling of positivity around networking. So Mark, you know, you do lots of networking now. When you first started out, how did you reframe your thinking about networking into a positive activity?
I think that the key thing is to be really sure about why you're doing it. So having the clear purpose. If I know the reason for having that call or reaching out or making that connection, then I'm much more motivated and feeling much more positive and excited about, you know, exploring it and being curious about as to who the other person is, what they do, and how we can help each other. So that level of mutuality. What I found is that I had a negative perception of it if I had an hour in my diary for networking, but actually I didn't work out why I was investing an hour. And all too often that would be deprioritized. I'd shift it and I'd do some other work, answering emails or going to other meetings. Mm-hmm. But so for me, the real shift in mindset is be really clear about what value you'll see out of it and why you're doing it. Because if you don't know, then you're much better investing your time somewhere else.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of mindset might help, as well as that positive mindset? And we've looked at developing an entrepreneurial mindset for great networking. By taking an entrepreneurial mindset can enable us to be alert to learning, development and opportunity that create that common ground towards potential collective collaborative projects that are going to be mutually beneficial. So if we can kind of enter the spirit in this entrepreneurial mindset, it's creating that alertness to opportunity and what can we do together in this networking space. So what's an entrepreneurial mindset? First of all, picking up on Mark's point, reminding ourselves of our personal purpose and vision. So what is it we're trying to achieve from this networking? Keeping that in mind. And often personal purpose and vision is very deep held. It relates to values, but also those things and areas of work that you're passionate about, the things that you want to progress. And so it's not only satisfying some deep value and purpose needs, but also motivating. Be curious, read and prepare for those interactions. Keep that future focus on passions and specialisms, and use your networking to ask open questions and actively listen to others, their thoughts. Be prepared to share yours. Have a good, healthy debate. Seeking out challenging situations. The more that we put ourselves into networking situations where we feel the need to be out of our comfort zone, then we can develop the skills and confidence to manage them and see the results follow. So we may make a mistake, or the networking activity doesn't really go to plan, but really think about those aspects that can give us that opportunity and learn from that, do things differently next time. And thinking broadly and creatively. Yeah, if we approach our subject areas from different angles, we enjoy that debate, as we mentioned, welcome the challenge, seek out the difference and seek it out personally so we can be challenged about our thinking and hopefully come up with even better outcomes. And finally, keep doing it, keep committed to your networking strategy. Even when it feels a little bit challenging, keep that momentum up, keep that regular attention so that we don't have to then rebuild relationships. So let's think about this entrepreneurial mindset, what areas of this might you feel you need to put more effort and energy into? What might you need to work on more? So thanks, Mark, for sharing the poll.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to work on more for your networking, Mark?
Definitely keeping up the momentum. In the past, I've been a prolific networker for short bursts of time, and then everything goes cold for like 6 months, and then you have to pick up everything else. So the key thing is that you've got to always do it. It's not about doing it to the same level all the time, but keeping it going is really, really important.
Yeah. Okay, how are we getting on?
83, 85. So 3, 2, 1, and the poll, share results. And we've got, so looking down here, keeping up the momentum. Yep, that's coming out the highest. Seeking out challenging situations is the next. Remind ourselves of the purpose of why we're doing this. Yep. And then the curious, learn from mistakes is coming in, and thinking broadly are kind of the last 3 on there.
Lovely, thank you. Great. Okay, so continuing on that topic of purpose, seeing as it's kind of one of the most popular aspects, then let's think about how we can identify the specific objectives for each networking event we undertake. And of course, the objectives will vary depending on the event or the activity. So here's a selection of useful questions that can be helpful for you to prepare. So why have I chosen this event or activity? What is it about the event activity that's attracted me? Who would I most like to meet at this event? Sometimes we might get access to attendee lists in advance, maybe less so now, but it might be worth doing a bit of research. Who else is going there? Who might you be able to meet up with? What's one piece of information that I would most like to leave with? So one objective outcome. What can I contribute or share in this event or this activity? And what might I be able to learn? What do I anticipate enjoying, or what am I most looking forward to about the event? Some things attracted you to that event, so what could that be? And giving yourself that positive mindset from the start. And how do my event objectives, what do I want to get out of this particular event or activity, align with my longer term networking objectives? If you remember, one of the principles we talked about, having that longer term view, how does it fit in to the longer term view? So why not have a go yourself? Identify an up and coming virtual or face-to-face event or activity, and have a think about these questions to help you plan and prepare for it. Thanks, Mark. We've also got some top tips here, and we recognise that many of the connections we're making in the most recent times, of course, have been through virtual events, and sometimes that's been a little bit more challenging. And so how do we strengthen those relationships inside and outside of our organisation when many people are still working remotely? There may be a hybrid opportunity going on for some organisations, or we may still be into face-to-face events. So typical ways to network, conferences, presentation opportunities, they've not always been possible. Everybody's had to pivot. Some of those have transitioned to online. But are we aware of them? Have we seen what's taking place? Have we looked to see what online events are happening? To some extent, it's a real positive because it's helped us rethink our boundaries, our geographic boundaries. We've not had to hop on a plane. We can still attend from the comfort of our own home. So greater accessibility to some extent, obviously in terms of time and cost. And as I say, moving into this hybrid approach, there's likely to be a mix of virtual and live events for you to think about. In both situations, hopefully you've used your reflective questions to prepare. So this has given you the opportunity to make sure you're choosing your events wisely, which is effectively the top tip for either face-to-face or virtual. If we're working in a face-to-face space, It's about using our body language, being open and approachable, and of course supporting that with the verbal language too. So looking open and approachable and being open and approachable. Really using our active listening skills. So listening to understand rather than listening to respond. Thinking about who we're talking to, remembering their name, using their name, making that personal connection. Introduce yourself clearly. Have a practiced message to help you with this. Use some of your values and specific passions and areas of interest. The specific objectives that you'd like to get out of the session as part of the introduction. We talked about finding common ground. Look for that common ground and shared interests, trying to work through actively listening to spot what they might be. And also, while you're networking, think about potentially introducing those people you're meeting to other people that may be useful. Extending the network, being a connector, can be a really positive way of building networks and creating even more effective networks. If we're working in the virtual, of course, we need to think about our tech. We need to think about the camera. We need to think about that we might be on screen. How are we being seen on screen? Where's the camera angle? We've all seen experiences over the last few months and years to some extent where maybe the camera angle's not the most flattering and we're looking up somebody's nose or down on somebody's head. So be aware of how you come across on screen. Check your audio quality. If it's a networking event that you're going to be participating in, make sure that you can be heard. Think about the conference attendance lists if they're available. Who might you want to connect with? Can you invite them for a virtual coffee? If you're attending a virtual event, try and include your name, your role or interest on your profile. So, the ability to rename in Zoom, for example, I can include, as you can see on my profile now, I've got my name and the company that I work for. Use that opportunity to not only ensure your name is represented properly, but also maybe your interest or your particular organization. Just helps people recognize where you're from, and maybe they're thinking, I might want to connect with you. If you are attending the virtual event, please take the opportunity to participate, use the chat, ask questions, share comments. If you're being invited to join breakout rooms, make sure your camera's on. Reach out by private message if that's available and appropriate for you. These are the ways that you can start to make those connections with others in a virtual space. Make a note of any attendees and maybe reach out to them afterwards via social media, LinkedIn or your preferred social media. Send a personalized message and refer back to the event to make that connection. So, Mark, what's worked well for you in a virtual environment over the last couple of years?
I think the virtual gives you, because you're not there in person with everybody else around, you can actually take notes, you can listen to things, you can pick up, if somebody asks a question, then through a virtual channel, you can directly message them and say, oh, that was a really good question. What's your interest? So creating that common interest, I think that for the virtual events, it gives me time that I don't feel on the spot, is I've got time to think about things, and using those other channels is really useful for me, because I'm nervous in a live a conference. Then I feel very nervous about just going up to people and introducing myself, because it's that common interest and why am I doing that, and actually have we got anything in common, and I don't know. And the virtual offers a way for me to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thanks. Okay, so we've talked about networking events. There are other things that we need to be thinking of in terms of networking. So reaching out to people, of course, in a one-to-one, whether that's in person, a virtual coffee, a live coffee, a telephone call. Social media, think about your presence. How does your profile convey your purpose? Do you post? Do you comment on your areas of interest? By putting yourself out there and sharing some of your thoughts more publicly, you're going to be able to grow your network as a result. And recent posting from two colleagues in my network, they've just got married. So, hey, the power of relationship building via social media is quite amazing. Attending training events, yeah, it's a great way to make connections with other people that have got similar development needs. Maybe that's support, buddying up. So looking out for workshops on an AHR Learn, looking out for events where you can meet people and create a, experience of shared training space together can be a great way to build those connections. Special interest groups, committees, approval boards. There are so many opportunities within the NIHR organizational structure, and just having a browse through the intranet, get some great ideas for making some connections, especially within specific specialist areas. And we've built some online resources within this topic, which is all hosted by the Academy, and there's some great ideas on there that you can use to think about where else in the NIHR can I reach out to build my network. So let's summarize so far what we're thinking about in terms of building our network. We know building a network is critical to being a great researcher, developing your research career. It's critical for any career, of course. Effective networking is planned, it's prepared for, it has a purpose and a principle of mutuality. And getting into the positive mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, will give you a great foundation to build from. So I'd like to hear from you now. It's about stepping out and going out to network. So thinking about the benefits and some of the top tips that we've shared, the techniques we've shared today with you. Thinking about the mindset you need to be in, the actions you might want to take. How confident do you feel to grow your network now? And thanks, Mark, for launching that poll.
That's great. 60–70%. Got a speedy audience today.
Yeah, very, very responsive. Brilliant.
90. 3, 2, 1. Last couple. Okay, we'll end the poll there. Share results.
Great.
That's great. Yeah.
So what we're seeing, Mark?
So mainly majority quite confident, and then slightly a few folks are very confident, fantastic, and one not at all. So hopefully if you're not at all, then please add a question in the Q&A, and hopefully we can help you become more confident of developing networking. That's great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. Remembering that mindset, it might feel a little uncomfortable to start with, but stepping out of your comfort zone, focusing on mutuality, purposefulness, building really long-lasting and satisfying network relationships can be so rewarding and so fulfilling. So I urge you to try and look forward to answering any of the questions you might have. Yeah. So we've got some additional resources, as Mark mentioned. So if you opt for a copy of the slides, you'll have access to these additional resources. And as I mentioned before, we have an online resource on this topic within NIHR Academy. If you look for the leadership resources for the Leadership Lab, you'll see it there with lots more detail on this topic. And we'd love to thank you for your time and attention. We'd love to hear from you with any questions. So if I hand over to Martine, she's going to facilitate our Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark and Jo. That's a really interesting subject matter. And it's just a reminder that you can still pop your questions in the Q&A box. So we've got a few coming in already. So shall we get straight into some of our questions? All right, so the first one is, in terms of mutuality, what can you do if you are more junior in an early career and feel that you don't have much to offer to a more senior contact? I'll take that one.
I love this question, and often talk about it in coaching and workshops. What I love is that more senior people need fresh thinking and fresh eyes and fresh perspectives. And actually, some organizations will purposely create mentoring relationships from this perspective because it gives a different perspective for the more experienced person. So I would say mindset, thinking about you can offer that fresh perspective, different perspective, fresh pair of eyes, and you can offer different ways of thinking. So there's still a mutuality there, and actually it's a really beneficial mutuality. One particular successful relationship that I worked with somebody on was an individual who was really strong in digital skills. And they were able to share their digital knowledge and skill to the more senior person they wanted to be mentored by, as a kind of mutual exchange. And that senior person, yeah, they were not going to be getting involved in the day-to-day of digital, but it was great for them to give them a different perspective on how these things could help their work, transferring more digital activity. So it was a really positive outcome.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to go into the chat box as well. This is a similar question that Sam asked. So how do you overcome hierarchies? What happens if you do not feel or think that you have anything to offer? So it's a similar kind of question, isn't it?
The addition to that is that I'm a mentor, and actually the thing that's been exchanged, the mutuality, doesn't have to be a thing or knowledge, but actually as a mentor, the gratification I get is that I feel that I'm adding value to the other person. So actually linking with my own values is I feel that I'm helping, and actually that's the return. So as a mentee, or as a junior person, or you think you're less experienced, actually just by reaching out and developing this connection, the other person is seeing value from it. It's not about what the transaction of what's been exchanged, it's actually about the interaction. So don't downplay that I don't have anything to offer, because actually from the other person's perspective, you probably offer way more than you think you do.
I agree.
Yeah, and I like this question here that we've got. So networking events feel a bit like speed dating. Any tips on how to approach others, become more approachable, and what are your tips to improve the momentum of the networking collaboration?
This one makes me laugh because I literally went to a networking speed event and it was the worst thing I've ever experienced. It was really not positive. I think what helps is having that kind of pre-prepared introduction. So something that's going to give you confidence around being able to open up that conversation. And when I say that pre-prepared introduction, including something really meaningful in that introduction. So we talked about purpose, we talked about values, we talked about, those deep areas of passion and specialism that you are working with, trying to include some of that deeper perspective that automatically creates some genuine curiosity, because you're sharing something about yourself. It's not the kind of superficial conversation. And I think once you start going in at a much deeper level, you tend to be able to then have more fulfilling conversations. The other person will respond and perhaps share a little bit about them. So feeling comfortable with what you're sharing, of course, maybe practicing it a few times, saying it out loud to a mirror or to a very trusted friend or colleague will be helpful, and kind of getting almost a kind of an accessible message that you can draw on when you need it. Anything you would add there, Mark?
No, I think you covered that very well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's the second part of that question, isn't the momentum as well? And I guess momentum is keeping those relationships going for the ones that you think are going to be valuable, that you can give something to, that they can give something to you, is making sure you bring in some regular attention to that, rather than, as Mark said before, sometimes we let it lapse and then we have to rebuild it again, and that can feel sometimes a little bit challenging. Yeah. Thanks.
And again, this is a bit of a follow-on, as again, talking around the same subject matter, that I find it hard to go up to people to introduce myself to events. Any tips? And I know you've mentioned it already, but yeah.
Yeah, same here. I'm one of those, if I'm really clear about why I'm there and kind of, you know, value the fact that I'm there, I find it easy to go up to people. What I've found useful is that I'm naturally just a really nosy person, so curiosity. And the best thing to do for me is to go up to someone and ask them a question about maybe why they're there, or, you know, did you see that last presentation? That was quite interesting. Oh, why are you here? Oh, what do you do? And quite often, you know yourself, if people are curious about you, then you become interested in the other person. So rather than put myself on the spot, and I'm probably the worst person for the 30-second elevator pitch. I've been kind of working on one for 20 years. I'm really bad at it. But I overcome that by actually going across to someone and asking them a question. But being really clear about why you're there, and seeing that as a valuable interaction, rather than putting yourself under pressure to go and introduce yourself to somebody. And I think if you put yourself under pressure, you put yourself under even more pressure, and then it becomes even more difficult. Just go around the room and eventually you will connect with somebody, and it makes it easy to do that.
Okay, great. So this one is, how do you go about networking with more senior people when you don't have a local support, for example, a supervisor who can introduce you to those senior researchers?
Yeah, so I guess this is part of that planning process, isn't it? Reaching out, who are the people that potentially are going to help you in the longer term? Presumably you're going to identify people that have got some kind of common interest, so they're a specialist in the same field, or a field that maybe you could collaborate with, or some kind of connection to what it is you're trying to achieve. And I think it's about making that approach, whichever way is the better way to do it. Of course, it will very much depend on the situation, but by you know, making the approach, by explaining who you are, what it is you're looking for, what you can offer, can be a really nice, useful way of making that approach. And I guess, again, it's whether, would email be the most appropriate? Would a you know, a message through Teams? It depends very much on your organisation and the other organisation. But it's about doing your research and then carefully constructing a message that's going to kind of reach out in terms of that purpose, and as I say, what you can offer too.
The build on that is that you could all do this little exercise. Is if you go to your LinkedIn profiles and you look at your direct connections, you might have, I don't know, 20. So, you know, based on that question, is I've only got 20 contacts and I'm not able to get in contact with other people. You may have 20 or 100 direct contacts. Look at your second level connections and you'll have a few thousand. Look at your third level connections. You're probably up to 100,000, maybe 1 million connections. So you may not be able to directly connect to someone you're thinking you're trying to connect with. You will know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So it's a case of accessing your existing contacts and find out who they know, and maybe they can put an introduction for you. Most of my network, it hasn't been through a direct connection. It's actually been through other people that I've known. And even going to your third connection, it's not that far away. And pretty soon you get connected to some pretty cool people through that way.
Thank you. So this one is around, as a female researcher, it can be difficult to get into groups or environments that are more male dominated. Do you have any advice on how to be successful in such settings?
I think this is about being, you know, being brave and stepping out of your comfort zone if it feels difficult for you. So building that confidence through planning and preparing, and recognizing that purpose, and identifying the common ground as soon as you can, as you start to make those connections. I think by preparing and planning, identifying what it is you need, what you can offer, it gives you the confidence to really be able to make those connections. Anything to add, Mark?
A personal reflection as a male would be that I think some of my strongest connections are female. I find it easier to build, because it's all mutuality in building relationships. So don't be dominated by the male, because actually from my perspective, that they're the best relationships, professional relationships come through my female connections.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So just a couple more to go. So how can I convince my line manager that networking is a good investment of time and money, as they other than seeing it as skiving off?
Quite a common perception. This is you're trying to get a budget for approval to go to a conference or something. The organisations I've worked in before, the way of doing that was number one, as the person who wanted to go to the event, is to make sure that the manager knew the value of it. So value for me professionally, it fits with my performance plan, my actions for this year. It kind of helps that. And value for the department or the function, because I'm going to learn something. I can offer to bring that back and do a presentation to everybody about what I learned from that conference. What I can also do is go around my colleagues and say, I'm going to this event. This is the agenda. Do you want me to have a look for something? Do you want me to ask some questions on behalf of the group? So actually, it's not about you skiving off and avoiding work, is that you're offering some tangible value to justify the expense. So the organization I've worked in before is actually, it wasn't a business case, but there was an approach, is that you need to make sure it was connected with something of business value, and then you could justify the expense, which really helped.
That's great advice.
Okay, so the final question. So how do you see networking during COVID? How can we still have successful interactions despite reduced numbers of face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on this, didn't we? The virtual events. The challenge with having to work in a virtual way and network in a virtual way is everything needs to be so much more intentional. We can't just rely on standing next to somebody and, getting eye contact and then having a little chat and then, making that relationship. We have to be more intentional. So we have to be more bold to some extent. If we're seeing somebody on a Zoom conference that maybe is somebody that we'd like to reach out, we might need to think about, if it's enabled, send them a direct message and really like the chance to get to know you and talk about this. Would you like a virtual coffee? So I think it's about taking time, looking to see who's on events with you, using those virtual events to help you to not only raise your own profile, but then using the opportunities to make the connection. So if you're in a breakout, doing a quick introduction in that breakout, or if you're doing a chat or a question and you spot somebody else asking a chat, making a chat comment, offering, if you feel comfortable, to share your contact details with them. Anything else, Mark, you wanted to add to that?
Well, just to echo what you said, you got to be more purposeful. It takes a bit more effort. You can't rely on serendipity of being floating around 100 people and hopefully catch the eye of someone or something crops up. It's just, you've got to be more purposeful, but there are channels, there are ways of doing it. It just takes a bit more effort. But if networking, if you've identified that it's a valuable thing to do, then you'll put the effort in. And we should be using multiple channels anyway. We'll just tend towards the more virtual ones if we're not able to meet people face to face. Okay. Just bear in mind as well, if people can't go to conferences, actually you've kind of opened up your network globally if you're really good at the virtual stuff and offline. Yeah, you're not just limited to people who can travel to London or to on the continent or wherever the conference is. Actually, you've widened your potential networking. It just takes a bit more effort to do it.
Yeah. In fact, it's making me think when, because of the NIHR Academy conference last year, I think it was in November last year, and they did some great sessions before the conference. They built in some yoga time and some mindfulness sessions, and things like that are great to go to, because you're kind of meeting people in a different environment. So you've got something else to kind of think about. And then, you know, if you then end up in a breakout room with them later on, oh, you were on the yoga session, you've already got those kind of connections. So taking advantage online of some of the social interactions, the less agendarized actions, can be really, really useful too.
Yeah, fabulous. Right. Thank you very much. Okay. So thanks again, Mark and Joe. Hopefully everyone has found this webinar beneficial and feels able to implement some of the behaviours explored. So as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, for those of you joining us live, as we close the session, you will be asked to complete a quick evaluation in order for you, and you'll see a link that's now been put in the chats. This will give you an opportunity to share your email address so that we can receive, or you can receive, a copy of the slides. And if you do have time, could you please, you know, complete that for us, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. All our past webinars will be found in our NRHR TV YouTube channel under the Development and Support webinar playlist. So you will also find links in the chat box. They might come through there, the chat box there, with or that's already been mentioned. I know Joe and Mark has already mentioned the online leadership development resources for our NRHR Learn. There are 10 modules available that you can work through at no cost to you. And please also note the NIHR Academy events page on our site, so that can keep you up to date with all up and coming events. And thank you once again for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.